The First Dornish War was a 9-year conflict, which began when Aegon the First Targaryen attempted to conquer Dorne, which was the only kingdom in the Seven Kingdoms that had successfully resisted House Targaryen during Aegon's conquest. Houses that fought for House Targaryen were House Rosby, House Baratheon, House Fell, House Tyrell, House Hightower, and House Oakhart. Fighting on behalf of Dorne on the other side was House Martell, House Dalt, House Dane, House Fowler, House Jourdain, House Corgyle, House Santagar, with other smaller houses also fighting. Some notable commanders on the side of the Targaryens were King Aegon I, Queen Visenya Targaryen, and Queen Rhaenys. They also had Lord Orys Baratheon, Lord Harlan Tyrell, and Sir Adam Hightower. Some notable commanders on the side of Dorne were Princess Mariah Martell, Prince Nymar Martell, and Princess Daria Martell. They also had Lord Wyle of Wyle, Lord Fowler, Sir Joffrey Dane, and Lord Uther Uller. Now, the advantage clearly sided with the forces of the Iron Throne, who had 1,000 knights led by Lord Orys Baratheon, 2,000 knights, 300 lords, and 700 men-at-arms led by King Aegon I Targaryen. 27,000 men-at-arms led by King Aegon. The Reach host led by Lord Harlan Tyrell. They also had 3 dragons with Balerion, Vagar, and Meraxes. During Aegon's conquest, Queen Rhaenys Targaryen was sent to conquer Dorne in her brother's name. Instead of confronting the Dornish spearmen guarding the Prince's Pass in the Red Mountains, Rhaenys flew over the pass on her dragon to Vaith and God's Grace. She found the castles abandoned and continued her journey to the Planky town where only women and children remained. However, at Sunspear, the seat of House Martell, she found Mariah Martell, who was aged and the Princess of Dorne waiting in her otherwise abandoned castle. Mariah defied Rhaenys, stating that they would neither fight nor kneel. Rhaenys warned the Princess of Dorne that the Targaryens would return with fire and blood, but Mariah replied simply with, "You may burn us, my lady, but you will not bend us, break us, or make us bow. This is Dorne. You are not wanted here. Return at your peril." So Rhaenys departed, but the Targaryens made no direct attempt to conquer the harsh deserts of Dorne. Instead, they focused on their main conquests in the heart of Westeros. As such, Dorne was the only kingdom not to be conquered by Aegon in his initial conquest. But in 4 AC, King Aegon launched an invasion of Dorne. He was intended on completing his conquest of the Seven Kingdoms. However, House Wyle led an assault against the Targaryen forces in the Bone Way. The other Dornish lords abandoned their castles, neither willing to defend them nor willing to bend the knee. The first assault was led by Queen Rhaenys. On her way to Sunspear, she seized the Dornish seats that she encountered and had her dragon Meraxes burn the Planky town. Meanwhile, King Aegon and Lord Harlan Tyrell fought in the Prince's Pass. They faced heavy resistance as their forces were ambushed by Dornish defenders who fled and hid as soon as their dragons took to the air, and Lord Orys Baratheon led a force through the Bone Way. Lord Harlan Tyrell, while leading his army to Hellholt, saw many of his soldiers die of thirst and due to the heat. Those who finally managed to reach Hellholt found the castle to be completely deserted. Aegon briefly besieged Ronwood, which was defended by a few handful of old men, boys, and women. He found Skyreach abandoned, but at Ghost Hill was challenged to single combat by Lord Toland's champion. After Aegon had killed the man with Blackfire, he discovered that the, quote, champion had in truth been Lord Toland's mad fool. Worse, Ghost Hill turned out to be deserted as well. Orys Baratheon fared worse in his assault up the Bone Way. His army was pelted with rocks, arrows, and spears from above, while his men were murdered in the night. Towards the end, the Dornishmen blocked the Bone Way both in front of Orys' army and behind, and the Wile of Wile managed to capture Lord Orys and many of his bannermen and knights. They would remain captive of House Wile until 7 AC, 3 years later. When the Targaryens finally arrived at Sunspear, they discovered that Princess Moriah had vanished. Declaring themselves victorious, King Aegon and Queen Rhaenys placed Dorne under the rule of the Iron Throne. They returned to King's Landing, leaving Lord John Rosby as the leader of Sunspear and the Warden of the Sands, and charged Lord Harlan Tyrell with putting down any revolts that might arise. Aegon and Rhaenys had only just returned to King's Landing when the Dornish rebelled against the Targaryens. From Sunspear's Shadow City, Dornishmen came forth, retaking the castle. Lord Rosby was captured and thrown from a window atop the Spear Tower by Princess Moriah Martell. In 5 AC, Lord Harlan marched his army from Hellholt, intent on taking Vaith and Sunspear. In the deserts of Dorne, the entire army disappeared. Elsewhere, entire garrisons were put to the sword. The knights who had been in charge of the garrisons were horrifically tortured and mutilated. Lord Wile, called the Wile of Wile, and the widow lover eventually agreed to ransom back Lord Orys, Baratheon, and the other captured lords. In 7 AC, the captives were ransomed back for each man's weight in gold and set free. However, the Wile of Wile took off their sword hands so they could never take up arms against Dorne again. Orys became bitter and obsessed with revenge and resigned his office as Hand of the King. Intent on revenge, King Aegon unleashed his dragons. The castles who remained defiant were burned time and time again, where Dornishmen retaliated in 8 AC by setting half the Rainwood on Cape Wrath ablaze and sacked half a dozen towns and villages. In 9 AC, the dragons struck again, burning several seats. The next year, Lord Fowler attacked Nightsong, taking its defenders hostage, while Sir Joffrey Dane marched an army to Oldtown and razed the fields and villages nearby. The Targaryens unleashed their dragons a third time, this time upon Starfall, the seat of House Dane, Skyreach, the seat of House Fowler, and Hellholt, the seat of House Uller. At Hellholt, the dragon Meraxes was shot down from the sky with Queen Rhaenys upon her back, when a bolt from a scorpion pierced the dragon's eye. Although Meraxes destroyed the castle's highest tower and part of its curtain wall in its fall, the death of both the dragon and queen was the greatest success the Dornish had against the Targaryens. The grief Aegon and Visenya felt at the death of Rhaenys was great. The next 2 years would later be called the Year of the Dragon's Wrath. The Targaryens burned every Dornish stronghold at least once, with the exception of Sunspear and its Shadow City. The Dornish believed that the Targaryens refused to attack Sunspear because they were afraid that Princess Moriah might have purchased a device from Lys to slay dragons with Archmaester Timothy. He suggests a different explanation, suggesting that Aegon hoped this would instead turn the Dornish against the Martells. Letters have been discovered that Marcher lords urged Dornish lords to surrender while claiming that House Martell had purchased their safety from the dragons. Regardless of what is really true, the Dornish lords and smallfolk remained loyal. Aegon and Visenya also placed bounties on the heads of Dornish lords, who in turn placed bounties on the Targaryens and their allies. Half a dozen Dornish lords were successfully assassinated, though only 2 of their killers ever lived to collect their bounties. King Aegon was attacked on 3 occasions, and Visenya was attacked on several occasions as well. One day, when Aegon and Visenya were assaulted on the streets of King's Landing, only Visenya's swift intervention saved Aegon's life. This attack is what led to the creation of the elite bodyguard known as the Kingsguard in 10 AC. Lord Fell was killed in a brothel in King's Landing, while the Wile of Wile committed atrocities, particularly in Faunton and Old Cloak. Although Dorne was blasted, burning, and on fire from the Red Mountains to the mouth of Greenblood, the Dornish continued to fight. The First Dornish War came to an end in 13 AC when the following death of Princess Moriah Martell, her elderly son Nymar, now the ruling prince of Dorne, sent his daughter Doria to King's Landing with an escort as a peace envoy. She brought with her the skull of Rhaenys' dragon Meraxes and a letter from Prince Nymar, The sight of the dragon's skull angered many at the royal court, such as Queen Visenya and Lord Ores, but Aegon refused to act against the delegation. Instead, Daria was allowed to deliver her father's terms. Prince Nymar wanted peace but would not submit to the Iron Throne. Aegon was determined to refuse this offer until Daria handed him her father's letter. Atop the throne, Aegon read the message. Men said that when he was done, his hand was dripping blood, presumably from clenching the throne too hard. Then he burned the letter, after which he left for Dragonstone upon Balerian's back. He returned the next morning, agreed to the peace terms, and signed the treaty. The contents of the letter are unknown, although many speculate. Some claim it was a simple plea from one father to another, heartfelt words that touched Aegon's heart. Others insist that it was a list of all those lords and noble knights who had lost their lives during the war. However, some also believe it said that Queen Rhaenys survived her fall, but was being kept captive in extreme torment, and that the Dornish promised to end her suffering if Aegon agreed to end the war. Others suspect that the letter stated that Nymar was willing to spend all of Dorne's gold to hire the faceless men of Bravos to assassinate Aegon's young son and heir Aenys if Aegon did not sign the treaty. Whatever had been in the letter, the result was an end to the 9-year war. Although other Dornish wars would come, the peace treaty Aegon had signed lasted throughout his own reign. Aegon kept up good relations with Princess Daria and visited Sunspear together with his eldest son Aenys on the 10th anniversary of the peace in 23 AC. Father and son came to Sunspear upon their dragons Balerion and Quicksilver. Both of Aegon's sons, Aenys I and Maegor, made sporadic attempts to add Dorne to the realm during their reigns. Additionally, the Dornishmen opposed the Targaryens on several occasions during the peace. After the death of Aegon, an outlaw known as the Vulture King rose in the Red Mountains of Dorne, gathering an army 30-some thousand strong. Although Princess Daria claimed the Dornish did all they could to put an end to the Vulture King, in truth, they mostly ignored it. In the end, it came down to the Marcher Lords to defeat the Vulture King, which they did during the Vulture Hunt. In 49 AC, as King Maegor's tyrannical reign was falling apart, reports came in from the Dornish marches in the last months of his reign suggesting that the Dornishmen were gathering their forces, preparing to invade the realm. During the reign of King Viserys' brother Daemon and Lord Corlys became involved in a struggle with the Triarchy over the Stepstones. Prince Corin Martell gave his support to the Triarchy in this struggle, and several decades later, Daeron I Targaryen decided to complete the conquest with his own conquest of Dorne. And although he succeeded, his success did not last, and it came at a high price.